Hi, this is the first video on passive introduction that I'll be doing. I figure we break it into two videos in case you struggle with forming the passive voice and doing a basic translation versus doing them in context. That way you can watch different videos and get different things out of them. So I hope that this organization is more helpful. So the first thing we're going to do is talk about forms, how to make verbs into the passive. It's relatively easy if we know our active processes already. For the first three at least, and so we'll go quickly through those, and then the perfect and pluperfect really start doing new things, so we'll kind of dwell there for a little bit. So as a prerequisite to this video, make sure you know how to conjugate verbs in the active voice, the present, the imperfect, and the future. No, the perfect and pluperfect are going to be different processes, so it's less important that you know the active forms of those. However, still good to know. So if you have any lapses in your memory in the present, in the future, or in the imperfect, and how to form the verbs, just take a quick look at those before continuing this video. Just you'll get more out of it, I think, that if you do that. So let's get started with the first slide. And as I was just saying, the processes for the present, the imperfect, and the future are going to be largely the same. And so just keep in mind, your O4ISU is still a thing. Your A vowel is still a thing for the first conjugation. If we remember our ARE, long ERE, ERE, IRE, and our verbs that go with them. Oops, that last one is not correct. There we go, and then the same kind of thing for the fourth. And so we have to remember those because I'm not going to reteach how to do that. Again, hopefully you have that down. If you need to go over those again, there's a video on verb conjugation in my channel. But we do have new endings. That's going to be the key here. So instead of like OST most dissonant or MST most dissonant, we are now dealing with RIS tour mur mini untour. And so we can imagine our active amat. Which is a third singular in the active voice. We've already known this one, amo amare. That's just simply going to, by the same process, be amatur in the third singular. So the equivalent there. The only difference between these two verbs is the active to passive, which is the change in voice. And so here you have he, she, or it loves. I'll just put he for the sake of time. And then here you have he is not doing the loving, but is loved. So your present passive, you can say your translation is he, she, it is verbed. If you have a different person, you can say you are verbed. But you'll notice that it is an addition of the verb to be and an ed that makes it passive. And so if you have, let's say, a first plural, like amamur. Let's write this out. So if we have, sorry, I'm just squishing it in there. Amamur is going to be translated we, and then instead of saying we love, that would be amamus. Amamur is, you have to add that verb to be. So we are. We don't say we is. We are. And then that ed, loved. We are loved. You'll note that the passive voice is the turning the subject into the patient, the thing being acted upon. It's no longer the agent doing the action. In the active voice, which is what here with amat, this is where the subject is the agent. However, in the passive, you get the subject as the patient. And so let's do one more example using a non-first conjugation verb. So let us erase some of this. Here we go. Sorry, sometimes I struggle to do things on the iPad and the app, so if you can bear with me for a second. All right, so let's use a different verb. We'll pick a verb like third conjugation. How about faccio? facere, feci, factus. All right. So we're grabbing this infinitive and we're saying, okay, it is third conjugation. And so we have O4 you. So what we had before was fuck it, which was he makes or he does. But if we want to say it is done, or it is being done, you just put that new ending on there. Notice the I doesn't change there. And just a really quick one, just to hammer the point home. Let us take the same root and say, okay, well, we have a third plural this time. Faciunt. Okay, in the active and then in the passive, again, the same vowel combinations are going to apply, so it's faciuntur, but it's just now in the passive. So here we have they are making, here we have they are being made. So there you go with the distinction. Make sure to rewind if you didn't catch any of that, but remember, it is the same process, different endings. We're going to go quickly through the imperfect and future. The reason being is that we're using the same new endings. So if you did not write them down, maybe to rewind, aristur, murmini untur, they're visual on the last slide, so rewind and write those down. But the imperfect passive, it's still ba. Okay, it's still ba plus ending. And the ending, though, is not MST mostus und. It's not bam, bas, bat, bam, spat, ban. It's now bar, baris, batur, bamur, bamani, bantur. So it's this aristur, murmini, untur on the ba. And so let's use amabat. He was loving. Now we have he was being loved. Was being loved. Note the translation here. You now have two forms of to be. That's okay. You don't actually even need the being. You can just say was loved. That's fine too. All right, they are both correct. But that past tense, you've made the verb to be past tense. So you said was instead of is. And because imperfect is often that past progressive idea, you can put an extra being in there if you want. You don't need it, it's optional. You say was loved or was being loved, they're the same thing, really. And so make sure you're taking note of the tense there. And we'll do one more example using the third conjugation, even though in the imperfect the process really is the same across conjugations. We're still going to do this anyway. So your favorite verb, occidere. Usually we'd have occidebamus for like we were killing the enemies. We're going to say occidebamus hostes. But now we're going to need to say we were being killed in the past tense. We were being killed. And so we are going to erase that S and add an R because our ending in the active was mus and at passive it's mur. So occidebamur is we were being killed. Notice the ba is still there. Your ending is just now passive instead of active, but it's the same process. All right, future is, again, same process, new ending. So you have to remember your bo, be, boo, ones and twos, A's and E's, fours and threes. I'm just going to write some forms because I think you can go look up the process of future somewhere else if you need to. But look, you have amabitur. And you're going to now say will be loved. You'll note the translation here. The will gives you the future. The be is that insertion of to be. You still have that ed there. And so you get will be loved. It is something that the subject is not doing. If you say like Cleopatra will be loved, she is not doing the loving. She is somebody else is loving her, but she is still the subject. So Cleopatra amabitur. Cleopatra will be loved. In the future, she will be acted upon. All right, and so let's also use okido again. All right, so it's third conjugation, and so we are going to use A's and E's. So instead of okidimos, we have okidemos. But that would be active, remember, so we are going to add our more. Okidemor, we will be killed. Notice the will be ed. That's the formula for the future passive. Again, though, I want you to, I can't emphasize this enough on the imperfect and future. Same process, new endings. In fact, that's the same as the present tense as well. Okay, so now we're going to move on to something a little more complicated because we're going to be utilizing the last principal part, something we haven't done quite yet. And here's the slide for the fourth principal part. I have to note that this is a good time to pause the video if you don't remember your sum esse fui, your verb to be in the present and imperfect, because I'm going to assume that you know the forms of that verb. All right, so let's undo that. All right, let's pick a verb. Let's pick amo amare. So we see amo amare. Amawi, amatos. Now, we've already dealt with the first two principal parts. These are your present, imperfect, and future roots. Okay, so these are the words that you use to create the present, the imperfect, and the future. The third principal part right here, amawi, that is the perfect active. So we have to make sure we distinguish. If we're doing the perfect and pluperfect passive, we don't want to be using that third principal part. That's for the active. That leaves this one for the perfect and pluperfect passive, amatos, okay? Now, you'll notice a couple things about this verb. It has a US ending. That's because this is technically a participle, and you'll get to that in Latin too. I don't want you to have to know what you're doing with that quite yet. However, it means that you're going to have to add something to this, not just like an ending, but like a whole other thing to make it a main verb. The cool thing about that is you already know the forms, hopefully, that you're going to add to it. And so if I want to say, Cleopatra was loved. Okay, so we're going to go Cleopatra in the nominative. What we're going to do is we're going to grab that fourth principal part. Cleopatra has been loved. Mata, to make it agree with Cleopatra being feminine. Est. So what we've done is we've taken the fourth principal part. We've added a form of to be. You'll notice it's third person because Cleopatra is not I or you, it is somebody else. And so the translation here is Cleopatra has been loved. You'll notice the translation of the perfect, by the way, there are two of them, has is like when I say in the perfect, you have to have that form of to have. You can say in the active, Caesar has conquered Gaul. That form of have does not go away in the English if you're translating very literally. So Cleopatra has been. There's your form of to be to make it passive, and then the ed again. So you for the perfect, you've kind of inserted this form of to have, but you still have your form to be and then your ed. Cleopatra has been loved. And it's a very interesting thing. Let's do another example before we do the pluperfect. The pluperfect, by the way, is going to work very similarly. So we're going to spend more time on the perfect and then just kind of apply the new rules to the pluperfect. All right. So let's say I want to say we have been loved. We'll put nos in there as our pronoun just for fun. You don't need it, but there it is. Now let's leave that blank for a second. But we have to remember our first person plural form of to be. Sumus. Okay, we have been loved. Now, you'll note before we had Cleopatra amata, to agree with Cleopatra. If this is agreeing with nos, and since I'm a guy, I'm gonna pretend that my group is masculine. Also, if it's a group of males and females, you use masculine anyway, and so it's kind of the safest one. I'm sorry, ladies, the languages are sexist. Nos amati sumus. You'll note again, we see that agreement between the ending of that first part of the verb and the subject nos. It is always going to have some kind of nominative ending, unless in Latin 2 you're going to learn something called an indirect statement. It'll have an accusative ending, but that's we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But for now, as a verb, as a main verb, it's going to simply agree with whatever the subject is. And since we are multiple people, that makes it plural. And since I am a guy, that means that there are guys included in my group. Therefore, it is masculine and plural and nominative, and then amati works. It's a 2-1-2 idea. Okay, it has 2-1-2 endings up there, so that's good news. 2-1-2 is, I think, the easier of the adjectival things. But you'll see, it's just this fourth principal part, verb to be. That's really like the key here. And you'll notice the perfect, this is the perfect passive. The perfect passive uses the present of to be. So I'm going to erase and write a couple notes for you. And if you didn't write that down, go ahead and rewind and write down the translations that we just did. I'll leave that up there, the last part there. So, okay, so we have the perfect passive is the fourth principal part plus the present of to be. All right, that's the key for the perfect passive, and you translate it in two ways. Has been verbed, or there's a very easy way to translate it. It's just was verbed. So there's two translations of the perfect passive. There they are, and this is kind of the note. The fourth principal part plus verb to be. In the examples, I showed you how they agree with the subject. That's also a rule, but I'm not going to include it here. I'm out of room, and hopefully that explanation was enough for that. So let's do really quickly the pluperfect, and for fear of making this video too long, I'm going to go faster through that because it's a different, it's a little bit different idea, but it's largely the same. So the pluperfect passive, the only changes we're making to our notes is that instead of a present, we have a, oops, let's erase that, sorry. This is the imperfect of to be. So it's still the fourth principal part. You're just not, instead of adding est, you're adding erat. Instead of sumus, you're adding eramos. Instead of sunt, you're adding erant. So it's just the imperfect of to be in form instead of the present of to be. I'll show you an example after we do this. But the only other thing is that we can't translate the pluperfect passive as was verbed, but we do have to translate it as had been verbed. So this is the only translation of the pluperfect passive, had been verbed. Okay, so that's really it. So if you're taking notes, like kind of this is the freeze frame. I want you to kind of rewrite pluperfect passive. It takes the fourth principal part. It takes the imperfect of to be with that fourth principal part, and you translate it as had been verbed. And I'll give you an example before we end the video here of the pluperfect passive in context. We can use the same sentence with Cleopatra, if you'd like. Alrighty. There's one spot that's not coming off. That's okay. Alright. So Cleopatra, she had amata est the first time, has been love. So this time we're going to do the same process, amata, but instead of est, we're going to insert the imperfect of to be, so erat. So here we have Cleopatra had been loved. So notice the had changed, but largely you get the same structure with been and this ed here, and all you've done is change to your imperfect form of to be. The forms folder on Schoology should have a nice summary of this. Also, if you just Google like forms, verb forms, you'll be able to see what I'm talking about in context. I'm not going to give you a whole chart on this thing for sake of time. So thank you for watching. I hope this cleared up some passive forms. I will be making another video with some more passive translations, which will also include the ablative agent coming up. So thank you for watching.